Hello there, and welcome to Holistic Health Detective. I'm Rebecca Jones, and in today's episode, we are going to talk about asthma and the investigative sort of pathway I took with my first patient who had severe asthma, very severe, and basically understanding the factors, like what are the actual factors involved in asthma. There are three, and how to approach each of those from a nutritional and biochemistry point of view, and then working with various supplements in different doses and forms to achieve the result which you would expect based on the principles, the nutritional principles. All right, so let's start with the factors, these three factors that are involved with asthma. Now, one of these is usually dominant in one person. So one person would have one of these factors as a dominant thing, and then the other two to a lesser extent. So number one, inflammation. So the inflammatory response is exaggerated in asthmatics. And what happens with inflammation actually is the airways become inflamed and they swell. They fill up with water, and then it restricts the passage of air into the lungs, and then you have this feeling of um, breathlessness. So that's what the steroid inhaler is for. Basically, it uses a steroid to suppress the inflammatory response so the swelling in the airways doesn't occur, and then the air flows more freely. So that's the first part. The second part is what they call bronchoconstriction. So all the airways have a layer of muscle all around them, and that muscle can cramp or tighten up. And that what that does is it restricts in a different way the airflow, so it narrows the airways. But it's basically a muscle cramping. That's the one that's predominant with people when they go out in the cold air and they breathe in the cold air, and then there's like this tightness. There's like a reaction to the cold, and it causes the muscles to tighten up there. So the way that's handled prescription-wise is with Ventolin. So Ventolin stimulates adrenaline, and adrenaline opens the airways by relaxing those muscles, and that's how that works. The unpleasant part of that, of course, is the heart palpitations. When you have that little surge of adrenaline. And so that's why children often get distressed with that briefly, because that heart rate goes up. So that's two factors. The third one is mucus. So some people can get quite an accumulation of thick mucus in there, and it doesn't really drain away. There's not particularly a medical approach for that one, but in the naturopathic world, we have answers for that. Okay, so this patient that came to see me, delightful woman, she had severe asthma. She needed her medications daily, particularly bad going out in the cold air. It was quite a one for her. And she was very predisposed to respiratory illnesses. So she kind of caught everything going around. She would often end up in the hospital at least once every winter with either a viral kind of pneumonia or bacterial pneumonia, and needing IV antibiotics, and sometimes more than once. And it was significantly impairing her quality of life. So now, addressing these three factors, I knew what to do with these, which we'll go into in a second. But what was new to me was how much I needed to use and what forms to achieve the results that I needed to achieve. And so it took a bit of work with that to get it right. So that's when I say you need this much of a dose, it's because I've worked it out with my patients to get the result, persisting until we get them well. So starting with the inflammation. So inflammation is basically controlled in the body by these little chemicals called prostaglandins, and some of them increase inflammation, so they're pro-inflammatory. Some of them are anti-inflammatory. So you do need an inflammatory response for the immune system to function normally. So, but when it's exaggerated, when the inflammatory response is too strong, you get these problems. So we needed to dampen down that, or bring the pro-inflammatory chemicals, if you like, down, and the anti-inflammatory chemicals up. So they are made, the anti-inflammatory ones, these prostaglandins, are actually made from a substance in fish oil. It's called EPA, that's what its name is for short, but it's eicosapentaenoic acid. So it stands for EPA. You don't get it in plant sources or in very small amounts. You don't get it in cod liver oil or halibut liver oil. It's in fish oil. And there is a wide variety of quality in the market. So I can tell you what we worked out to get that response, like a really good response to reduce inflammation, was between 850 milligrams of EPA up to 2,000. So in that range, generally the 2,000 in the beginning to kind of really get things under control, and then you can titrate down to like that 800 milligrams. So if you get your run-of-the-mill capsules over the counter, each capsule will be 180 milligrams of EPA per capsule. But the one I use is a liquid one. So the liquid, depending on the brand, is going to be anything from 850 milligrams per teaspoon up to about 1,800 milligrams per teaspoon. So quite significantly more for less volume. So you get more EPA for less oil volume. So you don't really want to be taking, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 kind of capsules. That's a large volume of oil, and it cannot be good for the stomach. So 1 to 2 teaspoons a day, so 1 teaspoon a day or 1 twice a day, that kind of thing of that high dose EPA brings that inflammatory response under control very quickly. Now, for that EPA to convert down, it needs zinc. Zinc's there's a double benefit there with zinc, because it builds your immune system to prevent these viral infections and getting respiratory illnesses that also trigger the asthma. So as I've said in many of my podcasts and videos before, the zinc you need to take high dose 3 months of the year, repeat 12 months later. So it can take a long time to get zinc up, like many, many months if you just do 5-10 milligrams a day. It's just not enough. You need 30 milligrams once or twice a day, depending on the situation, and you need to do that for 3 months. You don't do it long term because then it depletes the copper. So that's that one. Now, with the bronchoconstriction or spasm, if you like, it's a muscle. The muscle wall around the airways responds to magnesium just like other muscles do. So I didn't know that magnesium is needed as a mineral for the muscle fibers to go into a relaxation. So they use calcium to contract and magnesium to relax. So I didn't know that, and I knew that some of the like magnesium oxide, for example, is a very poor form of magnesium. Magnesium bisglycinate, for example, very well absorbed and tolerated. Once the absorption is how tolerant you are. So if it upsets your stomach, it means it's not being absorbed. That's what magnesium does. So we needed to work with different. She was taking some magnesium, was having a very, very mild benefit, but nothing significant. And so we worked on different doses and different formulations, and we found an exceptional formulation. So she could take this teaspoon of magnesium powder and go out of the house and not react to the cold air in the winter. Or if the chest tightened up, she could take a teaspoon of magnesium, and in about 40 minutes, the chest just relaxed. The airways just opened up, and she could feel the actual relaxation. Quite extraordinary. That formula was a bit of a genius formula, and unfortunately they changed the formula and it became less than 50% of its efficacy from previous. They started using very cheap forms of magnesium and took out the potassium and things like that. Potassium works very well for muscles as well. So that's not the formula I would use today, but back then it was a absolutely fantastic formula that we did use very successfully for many asthmatics. So that's those two. Now, the mucus is generally fairly easy to get control of. You can, taking dairy out of the diet, which we did with her for about 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the severity. 4 weeks is usually plenty for most people, and then just putting the dairy back in the diet every second day basis. So you're not having dairy every day. So dairy tends to be the trigger for having excess mucus. For some people, if they're eating lots and lots of soy milk, soy protein, soy flour, that kind of thing, that can be a bit of a problem, but it's not that common. It's not actually that common. It's more likely to be dairy. So that was very easy to do. Sometimes when the mucus is very thick, especially if there's a viral infection, you can do inhalations with eucalyptus or manuka, and they will thin the mucus out so it can actually drain away. So just steam inhalations or over a steam bath with some essential or good quality essential oil to thin that mucus out. That works well. So yeah, that's what we did. Now this particular lady, she did have all of these hospitalizations, severe asthma, and it turned out, even though it wasn't my intention or her intention to not take any medications, these approaches were not designed to replace the medication but to decrease her reliance on it, by kind of addressing these like biochemical factors. And she didn't need any medication. So that was extraordinary. She was super happy. I was super happy, obviously. Huge change in her quality of life, and not actually her first winter with no hospitalizations was a bit of a triumph for both of us. So that was great. It was really great. Now, these days, I would definitely add in vitamin D. Vitamin D wasn't, we didn't do as much vitamin D back then as it's needed now. But vitamin D stabilizes also the inflammatory response somewhat, and that kind of allergic response, like, that allergic response where you can react to inhaled allergens. Vitamin D is very, very good for that. You do need a vitamin D test, really ideally, especially if you're going to be dosing high. And vitamin D also is very, very good for preventing respiratory infections, particularly viral ones. So that zinc and the vitamin D together is a bit of a magic one for preventing infections. So there you have it. That's what we did. It took a bit of trial over working out the right dose, right formula, particularly on the magnesium front, and then getting the EPA dose right. You can get that improvement with plant-based oils. It just takes much longer. You can get it, within a couple of weeks, you can start to notice a good change with fish oil, but it's going to take, 3 months at least with plant-based oils, just because the EPA levels are so much lower than they are with the fish oil. So it definitely can be done in a vegetarian context. All right, I hope that's helpful. I hope you enjoyed that story. It's one of my absolute favorites. I have a lot of stories like that. And please feel free to pass on the information to whomever you feel might benefit. And if you want to continue to get these podcasts directly to your email, and the earlier ones that I've done, please feel free to subscribe. And thank you so much for listening. Wishing you a very happy, healthy day.